We have seen what I call fully structured craft, which is like, this floating in the air, fully structured craft. Long story short, 41 times, 41 different objects. And nine of those 41 objects or 41 sightings have been triangles. And so there you go. So 9 triangle sightings. Well, I'm going to share the top 3. And these are also just happen to be the top 3 triangle sightings I've ever had, as well. So I've had 1 or 2 other triangle sightings besides on my tour, but these are, these are the top 3 for me and the top 3 for my tour. Okay, so here we go. The first one here, and the drawing you see up, is a very, very, very rough sketch that I threw together for doing this for you guys today. And so out on my tour this night, I had, roughly 10 or 12 people. I owned 8 pairs of military night vision goggles, and pre-COVID, I was taking out up to 14 to 16 people at a time, although 10 or 12 was a pretty average group. And Nicole, your image went away. Oh, is that okay? Never mind. I just want to make sure you knew. Sorry. Okay, going back to, so this particular night, we had an average night out on the tour as far as the kind of sightings we were seeing. Oh, I think we had a double, 2 things flying together. I think it happened twice, and we have things that flash back at us. We had quite, this will matter later as part of the story. So we had quite a few things flash back at us. And it was in the summer. This was a year ago summer, end of summer. I believe it was August or September a year ago. And anyway, so 2 of the clients had gone out to the location in my car. The other cars had followed, but one couple decided to go in my car. Well, we left the viewing location, and this sighting actually happened while that couple and I were driving home. Okay, so from the sign location. So we had a good average night. Everyone was very, very happy. I certainly thought, that was the end of the tour. And often while driving out there or back, the clients, pick my brain about, personal experiences and stuff. And we're kind of doing that. Well, another thing I cover out on the tours is seeing what's called amber light, which is the most common color reported in UFO sightings, which is to see something amber colored, meaning kind of gold, orange, red, kind of along that lines. And I had talked about that and why that's significant. I've learned a lot from taking out physicists and 2 plasma physicists on my tour who taught me a lot about why we're seeing that. It's a huge, huge energy signal ionizing the air around it, and that ionization glows. And in the lab, you get what's called amber light. So they know they've achieved ionization of a huge electrical signature when they get that. And so plasma physicists coming on my tour educate me all about that. So we're driving home, and we're on Highway 89A in Sedona, and we're just driving, and we're talking, and we pass a major intersection in the middle of the heart of, anyone familiar with Sedona, it's the middle of the heart of town. It's the signal for Coffee Pot Drive. That's the name of the intersection, Coffee Pot, the street. And we're on 89A heading back towards the Center for New Age from there. So we're heading north on 89A, kind of northeast. Okay. And we see in the distance this big amber light, this big orange light, kind of reddish orange, almost red. So large orange light coming towards us. And as it's coming towards us, so the first drawing there, so you see, I did this like a storyboard. So you have 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, drawing 1 there is this large amber light coming towards us. And it's coming, it's getting brighter and brighter as it comes towards us. My clients are like, Melinda, that's not blinking. It's not blinking. It's amber. It's almost red. It's so amber. It's not blinking. And I've learned that a plane headlight can sometimes wash out the strobe that you would normally see on planes, the blinking lights. And so I thought, well, it could be a plane headlight. And I was telling my clients this, and it could be the headlight is washing out the strobe. We're on 89A. It's very common for planes to fly above 89A for, you know, navigation. It's obvious, you know, going over a lot of dark open desert that you have this well lit up town, you know, Sedona. So I'm like, okay, it's probably a plane headlight washing out the strobe. It'll probably go over us and start blinking. As soon as planes go over, you can then see the blinking. Or if they turn, so if it suddenly turned away from coming straight towards us, we'd see the blinking. Well, my client's like, Melinda, it's not blinking, it's not blinking. And then finally they both, now the gentleman, the husband, is sitting next to me in the, you know, front passenger seat, and his wife is sitting behind them. And they roll down their windows and literally stick their head out the window and they go, Melinda, it's directly over us and it's absolutely huge. And so I lean over the steering wheel and do this and look up, you know, way over the steering wheel. And I go, oh my God, you're right. So I turn right into the first next available driveway. Well, it's the next signal. It's a couple of blocks, about 2-3 blocks. There's another signal, and it's the signal for, it's called Mountain Shadows Road. And right on that corner, there's a couple little office storefronts. You know, there's like 3 or 4 little storefronts and enough parking for them. I pull right into that driveway, just enough that my, like, you know, just enough in that my bumper clears the highway. And by the way, you guys, we were out on the tour till about 10:30 at night. We talked about 10:45. So we figure it's at this point, probably right at about 10 minutes, maybe 5 minutes to 11, right when this happened. And so I'm still rolling. I put the car in park. I'm still rolling. My clients had already jumped out of the car, and I jump out and we look up and there's this giant triangle right over us. And now, as you can see from picture number 2 there, so below picture 1, it says the size is about 1 foot in diameter at arm's length. So if you know, put your hand up at arm's length and go about 1 foot in diameter above us, just right above us, just huge. We figured we were looking at something. Later when we got back in the car, you know, we're kind of guesstimating, you know, 300 or 400 feet above us and at least 150 feet in diameter, maybe 300 feet in diameter, you know, right over us. So, and so as we're looking up at it, it's a big black silhouette of a triangle, but it has its front leading point. Now here, you guys watch this. I have a visual aid. I almost forgot. So triangle, right? So it's like this in the air, like this, like point first, you know, up in the air above us. So going point first like that. And that front leading point going, you know, forward, back end towards us, if you will, that front leading point, this leading edge of it was glowing bright red. So it was like a bright red V on the front of what was kind of the thick front of the leading edge of this thing. And then behind that was dark silhouetted black. And then there was a big orange glowing area. And the the wife of the client starts to go to the car door. We're standing within 5 feet of my car. And she starts to go to the car door and she goes, where do you keep your lasers? Where do you keep your lasers? I want to, you know, so she opens like the car door going, where do you keep your lasers? She's kind of like dig through my car. I want to flash at it. And her husband like grabs her and stops her and says, no, honey, let's not take our eyes off of it. We don't want to miss if it does anything. And she goes, oh, okay. And so he stops her and I said, thank you, sir. And so she goes, oh, I wish I had a laser to flash at it. So she puts her hands up like this to her mouth and she yells, flash, flash, flash. But she was half kidding. Like she kind of did it kind of weakly, you know, and I could tell like she wasn't real serious. And she kind of just, you know, did it and said, flash, flash, flash. Well, suddenly that red point on the front grew so now to go to drawing number 3, the red light spread, like it got really bright and then spread and ended up covering the entire bottom of the craft in bright red light.
Wow.
I mean, like really bright and just like red, like tail light on cars, you know, and And suddenly, no joke, you guys, I swear everything I'm saying is exactly how it happened. I thought about this all this morning, and I said, I want to relay these exactly as and if you ask my clients, they would say the same thing, remember. So right then, like I said, the red light spread and the whole thing went flash, flash, flash. Well, we're standing right under a tall street lamp, which I also have there in the drawing. And our street lamps kind of have a triangular thing on top of it. It's just the way they work, like a deflector plate, you know. But we're under that bright street lamp, so it's like daylight where we are, you know, as far as the way it looks. And even though it's a nighttime thing, you know. And she looks at me like a deer in the headlights and goes, "Oh my God." You know, and then with her voice quaking, no joke, her voice quakes, and she goes, "Did I make it do that?" And I had to have a good response, so I turned to her and I go, "Well, you asked." No joke. And their husband was really cute. He goes, "Ooh, honey, look how powerful you are. Look what you did. You're so powerful," you know, kidding with her. And she's just like in shock. She's just like, because I don't think she actually expected it to flash. And the whole thing lit up red and flashed. Okay, then going to drawing number 4, and then it slowly kind of drifted away, picked up a little speed, originally I thought it was 2 or 3 blocks away, but the more I think about it, it went from being, you know, this big above us, a foot in diameter, to being the size of about a half inch or an inch, you know, at arm's length. So it had flown, I don't know, you know, pretty far. It hadn't really gained in altitude. It just kept going that way. Well, I take that back. Yes, it had gone up a little bit in altitude, but not that much. And it was now about a half inch in size in the distance. And then all of a sudden it went, shot straight up like a bullet, and then was gone. Of course, just shot straight up and was gone. So there you go. So that was sighting number 1. Now I'm going to, or actually I should say 3, 2, 1. So technically that was number 3. And then I'm going to go 2 and 1 to the best one. Okay, so there you go. That was that one. Now to the next slide, please. Okay. Now, so that was, I'm going to go 3, 2, 1, like I said. So that was 3, and this is number 2. And really, these two really tie, you know, number 3, number 2 for second place, really. But number 1 is number 1 for a bunch of reasons. Okay, so this time we're out at my viewing location, and you know, it's nighttime. We're kind of up on a hill in a clearing, and in the distance there's Munns and Lee Mountains, for those from Sedona, Courthouse Rock to the right of it, Bell Rock, and then the side of Cathedral Rock there. And so we're up there, and one of my clients goes, "Melinda, what's that?" And there's this big blue light in the distance. And I'd already explained colors that night. So I said, now after you, in the lab, in getting plasma, you go from the amber light, according to the plasma physicist that I've met, and you go from the amber light, and then you get, I believe it's the same thing Hal Puthoff talks about, which is called blue shift. In the red light, after it gets really intensely red, goes to a different kind of plasma, higher vibrational plasma, something like that, and it goes to blue. So I'd already explained that to my clients. Then after the blue, you get green. So in this case, which we've seen all these colors before on my tour. So here's a great big blue light in the distance, and my clients go, "Melinda," and I go, "Remember what I said about colors? That's blue, that's highly significant." And it starts coming towards us, getting brighter and brighter. And as it comes over us, and I had 4 women plus me, so 5 of us on this tour. And it starts coming over us, and it was a triangle that came right over, hovered right over us. And to give everybody the idea of size, it was 2 inches in size at arm's length. So if you go 2 inches by 2 inches, you know, by 2 inches on each side, you get the idea of its size, you know, at arm's length, 2 by 2 by 2. So, and that's about exactly. So that, you know, pretty darn close. And the whole thing glowed this really cool, like periwinkle blue. That's blue, which is, for those who don't know what periwinkle is, blue, which is a tiny tint of purple to it. It's more blue than purple, but has a tint of purple. And the whole thing glowed that way. And it hovered, again, right over us, what we thought was only a few hundred feet really above us, maybe 1,000 feet at the most. It depends on how big it was, you know. And one of the ladies then goes, so that was drawing number 2. Drawing number 3, bottom left. So one of the ladies goes, we'd already flashed at things that night and had things responding to us, and flashing back. And she said, I want to flash at it. Of course, we're all holding our lasers, and no one had hit it yet, but she says, well, I'd like to flash at it. And so I was like, yeah, go ahead. Shame on me. But I envisioned my client there like a, like a pile of ashes, or, Lot's wife, a pillar of salt, Anyway, so she starts flashing at it, and nothing happens. I guess, Nicole, you're laughing good. And nothing happens. So all of a sudden, so she's flashing at it. And so I said, okay, let's all flash at it. So we all were flashing at it. And all 5 of us are going flash, 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 flash with the laser. And on my tour, we do a pattern of 3 flashes and then none for a while, like turn it off for a while, and then 3 flashes, none for a while. And I do that because the same reason SOS is that pattern. Early on my tours, some gentleman went out with us, suggested that because it shows an intelligence signal. It's not by chance to go 1, 2, 3, long pause, 1, 2, 3, long pause, shows a deliberate intelligence signal. So we were doing that, and we're flashing at it. And all of a sudden, now the whole thing's still hovering right over us, and our green lasers, 5 of us, 5 green lasers beams are hitting it. And it was a solid, very reflective object because the lasers are bouncing off of it. In fact, now when I take out tours, I'll hit the side of the car. We're like 30 feet away from the car, but I'll hit the side with the lasers to show people how the lasers reflect off and then make beams all over the place. Well, we're hitting it, and beams are shooting all over the place because our lasers, when we use 500 milliwatt green, they're reflecting all over off of it, and those beams can go up to 100 miles unobstructed is the lore, long story short, but they can go up to 100 miles unobstructed. And so the beams are clearly hitting this thing. It's maybe only 1,000 feet or less above us, and they're reflecting off all directions. And so we're all going flash, 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 flash. So everybody stop. So we all stop. All of a sudden, in the middle of the bottom of this triangle, an orange light comes on and goes, flash. And I go, okay, everybody go again. Ding, 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 ding. Where the lasers are bouncing off of it. I go, stop. All of a sudden, the little orange light came on. Again, and the whole thing's glowing periwinkle blue. But in the middle of the bottom, an amber light came on and go, flash. And so did it again. We did it again. Long story short, we got it to do it 4 times. It flashed at us. And then finally, on like the 5th time, we're all lasered, and then it didn't flash. Uh-oh. Can you go back to that drawing? Yeah. One before that, please. Grant, one before that. There we go. Okay, so it goes flash. And there we go. So and so did it 4 times, and then the 5th time we lasered it, and then I said, okay, we're going ding ding ding. So everybody stop, and then it didn't flash, and I said, okay, do it 1 more time. Everybody flash, ding 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 ding. Okay, stop. It didn't flash again. So then I thought, okay, let's not piss it off. In case, So then it started to fly away, but we got it to flash at us 4 times. Then it started to fly away. And it flew straight over some hills to the due west of us. And then it got a little smaller, got about 1 inch in size at arm's length. So like 45-degree angle up, about an inch or ½ inch in size at arm's length. All of a sudden, it became a little white light, and then that shot straight up like a bullet. So that was sighting number 2. Okay, next drawing, please. Grant, next drawing.
I like the flashes and responses. It seems to always catch people off guard.
Oh yeah.
When they get exactly what they ask for. So that's why I was smiling and chuckling along. I think it's wonderful.
Yeah, well, I mean, that thing glowed periwinkle blue in the middle of the bomb, and amber light goes flash. And then, the first time when the client said, I want to flash at it, I'm like, sure, you go first.
You don't have the slide up there? It's up there.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Okay, so now I'll go to the next one. Thank you, Grant. Okay, next one. So we're in that same location, which is where I usually take people. We're up on a hill, for those familiar with Sedona, between Airport Mesa and Cathedral Rock. It's actually the Slick Rock Trailhead area, for those familiar. Okay, so over Airport Mesa in the distance, and this time there's 7 of us total on this tour. So 6 clients plus me. And there's 2 bright red lights that start coming from the north, coming straight towards us, over from, you know, Airport Mesa, but way in the distance beyond it. And so they start coming, they're getting brighter and brighter. As they come over us, so now I go to drawing number 2 there, we have 2 large black triangles silhouetted, each with a little red light in each corner. And there were 2 of them. One was on the approach, one was just slightly ahead of the other, you know, on approach, like slightly ahead of it. And, but pretty much right next to each other. And they come and they hover over us right next to each other. And to give everyone the idea, so again, my visual aid, if you look up, now this is 9 inches, this in, you know, diameter. And so I would say at arm's length, these were about that size, like 9 inches, the same as this. You know, if I hold it at arm's length, well, that gives a false idea. That's too close to the camera, but maybe 6 inches. We kept thinking they were about width of the hand, you know, 6 inches in diameter at arm's length, right over us, both black silhouettes, little red light in each corner, and hovering right over us. Now, my 6 clients, one guy was a retired airline pilot. He had already told us he had been a military pilot for about 12 years. He told us this early in the evening. I've had hundreds, I mean, literally like 300 pilots, but he said, I'd been a retired airline pilot for 2 years. I was an airline pilot for about 40 years, so he was an older gentleman. And before that, I was an Air Force pilot for 12 years. And so, and he had also said he had instructed pilots on difficult landings and takeoffs for one of the major airlines that he worked for. He had already told us all about that. And he had shared with us all night long previous sightings he had had. So one gentleman, one of the husbands, you know, turns to him and goes, okay, sir, as we're looking right up at these things, you know, hovering right on top of us. And he said, okay, sir, how many times have you been right under large planes, you know, like 747s landing and taking off? And we're looking up and the guy goes, oh, I don't know, about 1,000. You know? And so the other man then goes, okay, how high up are these, and, you know, how big are they? And I'm going to quote him. He said they're between 500 and 700 feet above us. And he figured lower rather than higher, closer to 500 feet, but not more than 700 feet. And he figured both craft were about 300 feet in diameter. Wow. So I'm quoting him. That's what he said. And so then we're sitting there like this isn't already incredible enough. All of a sudden these 2, all of a sudden it's not incredible enough. All of a sudden these 2 triangles drift sideways away from us, like they're right over us, and they just start to just go sideways and go about halfway. We're right next to Cathedral Rock. We're only, you know, 100 yards or something, but it goes, or 200 maybe, but it goes right between us and Cathedral Rock, just like I drew in picture number 3. And they're low enough that we can see, they're maybe a little higher than I drew in the picture there in 3, but we could see the top of Cathedral Rock above them. So we knew that they weren't above Cathedral Rock, they were between us and there, because we could see, you know, Cathedral Rock sticking up above them. And then all of a sudden, both, whoop, it says internet unstable on my end. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. All of a sudden, both objects in the sky do this. They turn like this. Actually, just like this. So we're here. We're here on the ground, that my fingers are me, or us, okay. And it's up here, and suddenly they do this in the sky. They both tilt at like a 45-degree angle. At first that drawing wasn't coming out good, but when I finally scribbled it in, I said, you know what, that pretty much captures it. They tilted like this at a 45-degree angle, and then started to float. So they'd come from the due north. They'd kind of arced over us. Now they were drifting kind of in a big arcing turn towards Cathedral. And then they were heading back north, a little northeast. And as they took away, so they'd made this U-turn heading northeast, they were drifting slowly, still at that angle. And then we hear from in the distance behind us is a low mountain called House Mountain. From over there, we hear a jet coming in. And in comes an F-8 up higher than them. Drawing number 4, the perspective is off, but it's up higher than them, and it comes in and we hear it, and it comes in fast and slows way down, and then follows these triangles, just follows them right. And in the distance is Munns Mountain, for those familiar with the area, Chapel the Holy Cross area, and there's a dip in Munns Mountain right behind Chapel the Holy Cross. They take off right through that dip, and the F-18 follows them right out. So that was that sighting. So that was, yeah, there were two triangles right over us.
Where was that jet coming from, do you think?
Well,
where would the jet be coming from?
I've taken out a handful of military pilots. Luke Air Force Base, which is right outside of Phoenix. So okay. I've taken out a handful of those pilots on my tour. They tell me at regular cruising speed, not even going very fast, they're just, you know, regular cruising patrol speed, they're over Sedona in about 15 minutes, they say. Wow. So, you know, 15, maybe 20 minutes max. So, but this guy was coming in fast. So, you know, if they scrambled him or he was up in the air and they sent him over, he could get there pretty fast. And these were hovering over us for quite a while. So, you know, but he came in just as they were starting to move away from us. And he was up a little, he was definitely up higher than them, but not extremely high. But he came in fast, slowed down, and then literally followed them. And they had to clear Munns Mountain. They had to have gained, you know, in altitude, because that's higher. So they gained in altitude, the two craft to clear Munns Mountain, and then the plane was about even with them. So the plane literally followed him right through that V. I mean, anyone who's familiar with out here, if you look over the Chapel, the Holy Cross area, right where there's this dip in Munns Mountain, they went right through that V, and the jet followed them right there. And that's between 6,000 and 7,000 feet, right where that is. I'd have to ask, wonderful, you know, maybe a ranger or somebody, but my understanding, I'm pretty sure that V right there is probably 6,000 or 7,000 feet. They went right there. Okay. So that was that one. So there you go, you guys.
A quick question for me.
One more slide here.
Yeah, we'll do. Let me ask.
Oh yeah, show the next slide. I'm sorry.
We do have one more slide.
Go ahead.
Now, Melinda, do you get
go ahead, you can go ahead and go to the. There's just one more slide for this same event.
Hang on. Shoot. Now we can't move the slide here.
Do you get the impression, I mean, obviously in your previous slide, you said one was the front and you could tell there was a definite back. Now with some of these triangles, do you think that any of their points?
No, I mean, it's just a big triangle as far as, you know, right, if it's going front, if it's, you know, this is just a triangle. This is equal on all sides, but you make right, one of these points.
So would you say that any point
forward, you know, like that? So it was doing that.
Would you say any of the 3 points could be the front or be a forward motion? So if the triangle was coming toward you and then all of a sudden started going another direction, would that point become the lead? You know what I'm saying? Like the front of the craft, I guess I would say, like its maneuverability. I guess
because it's, yeah, well, because
it's not like it spins
and
then goes in the direction.
This one, the two. Well, this time, I'll do this. This time they came over us, you know, so they're over us like this, but okay, I'll turn it like this so everyone can see. When they were over us, they suddenly drifted sideways like this. So that point, if they were coming towards us and this part going sideways, well, you know, like I said, they're coming sideways. Well, then they're going like this. So at that point, one of the other points did become the forward. And then when they tilted, they took off the other direction, the back point. So now they may be rotated because the whole time they were kind of turning, but I don't think they were turning to where the front point went like that. So I don't think they were doing, this is the front now, so it goes like that. We're just kind of literally drifting sideways, maybe tilted just a little, you know, and I mean, they were tilted a lot, but then one of the back or side points became the point going forward. So in that case, it clearly changed, you know, I mean, the way I remember seeing them, they had to have suddenly used a different point as the leading edge. Yeah.
All right.
Good question.
Thank you.
I never really thought about that, but yeah, that's the way we saw it.
Well, what made me think of that is I have seen some.
And then this last drawing is just something, when I originally reported this to MUFON, I created this to show where Airport Mesa is. We're standing on a hill between Airport Mesa, location of the 7 witnesses, between Airport Mesa and Cathedral Rock, and then Munns Mountain and the Chapel of the Holy Cross area. So that shows the path, the whole path that they flew, and that they made this banking turn. Yeah. Now they were flat coming towards us and flat over us. They didn't tilt to that angle, like I said, that 45-degree angle, until they were between us and Cathedral, where they were drifted flat, and then all of a sudden did this. And it was, I mean, it was so dramatic, because if we didn't already get a sense of how big these were, when they went sideways and tilted, you really got a sense, because then we were seeing the whole top, you know, surface of it almost, and then, you know, and it was like, whoa, you know, then we could really get a sense of how big these were.
Wow.
So that was that sighting. Yeah. And luckily, you know, I mean, the first sighting, I just said there were 3 of us, so I had 2 witnesses with me. I had 4 women with me on the other one, so there's 5 of us. And then this time there's a total of 7 of us. You know, that's one thing great about my tours when we've seen structured craft. It ain't just me. I've got multiple witnesses, and some of them have been 10, 12, 14 people present, you know. I mean, there was one time I led a big, we had a big structured craft sign of a big U-shaped object out near Giant Rock in Southern California desert. And that time there were 2 different head counts. It was either a total of 62 or 63 people. So, you know, the benefit is also having witnesses, you know, present too. But anyway, so those are my 3 best triangle sightings.
You were talking to Nicole's science and intelligence advisor, Bob McGuire. He was going to come out. Have you settled that yet as to him coming out to try to capture stuff?
Yeah, well, no, well, you know, there's a slight obstacle going on called COVID, you know, unfortunately. So, yeah, but him and his wife are going to come out, and he's also going to bring his Sky Hub, you know, equipment. And I actually have talked to a local business owner I know quite well, who has a business up on Airport Mesa in a separate building. And he has agreed to host the equipment at that location. And Airport Mesa is kind of our biggest, highest point in town, with a nice kind of 360 view. And so, you know, hopefully we'll eventually get Sky Hub, you know, set up there. And so I really look forward to you know, doing that and working with Bob on that. But meanwhile, him and his wife want to come out. He wants to do my tour, and we'll go from there. So I look forward to when I'm able to do that. You know, a lot of people, you know, next year when we're over the COVID stuff eventually, I have so many people, and I already have so many people coming out, and we're open here. You know, restaurants are at 50% capacity, every other table, and restrictions, you know, for wearing masks and everything. But otherwise here in Sedona, we're open, and I'm still doing tours every night with safety precautions and social distancing, of course, but we're still doing them. And so, so as soon as he can get out here, Bob, if you're watching this, come, we're open, you can come, you know, so come do it. And, but as soon as he can, you know, I look forward to taking him.
Beautiful. Now there's a rumor going around that you've been on a craft, a triangle craft.
Yes, I have. And one of my lab is MIL for military and AB for abduction. One of my MILAB experiences. Absolutely.
Are you going to tell us about it?
Do you want to go over that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Yes. All right. Now, okay. All right. Here we go. I'm going to go to a split screen. Here we go.
I'm
Oops.
pausing my video for a moment, but I'm
There we go.
still here. It's all good.
Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes, we
Yeah, it
can.
looks great.
Okay. Nicole, are we good? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So now this is a very detailed abduction that I had that would take extremely long to go into the whole thing. I will give just a brief synopsis overview for context. I was living in Corona del Mar, California. I was woken in my bed by two camouflage guys who drugged me and put me on a stretcher from my bed. And I had a little studio apartment, and we maneuvered around the room. Whoop, it says my internet's unstable, so I want to make sure that goes away. There we go, in case it's garbled. And they maneuvered me around the room, and apparently the drug took effect and I passed out. Next thing I know, I come to, and I've had a lot of conscious memory over this experience, as well as a lot of regression sessions. Psychotherapist, full-fledged PhD of psychology, Dr. Deborah Troncalli, had regressed me, and as well as another hypnotherapist friend of mine who had worked with quite a few abductees had regressed me as well about this. And Dr. Troncalli did a number of regressions for me on this. I believe I may have had as many as 12 complete regressions on this experience because it was very blocked and took a lot to remember. It was very, very traumatic, the whole thing. Parts weren't and parts were, but there were some very traumatic parts that I was blocked on. But in this case, after I was drugged, I came to on the back of some kind of military transport vehicle. I think it was, some kind of truck, basically, or van, but still laying down on the stretcher. And I remember when it came to a stop, guys took me on the stretcher out of it and across what I would say was a large open, either like a large open parking area or like a tarmac, which will make sense. I'll say tarmac. Eventually, they carried me a couple hundred feet and then sat me down on the ground. And meanwhile, I was coming to more and more and very, very conscious, very, very aware. I was covered. I was still wearing my nightgown. I was covered with a blanket and on the stretcher. But all of a sudden, either I saw it right as they were maneuvering me around and going to set the stretcher on the ground, and or they had set the stretcher already on the ground. But during that whole thing, I looked to my left and I see this sloping black surface, like I'm looking at, something that's sloping up at roughly a 45-degree angle, maybe a little shallower angle. And I'm seeing matte black. It's not shiny. In fact, it's quite dull, matte, flat black. And I go, what? And I could smell jet fuel and what I would say is ozone, like a burnt electrical smell, but mostly the jet fuel kind of smell. And I could hear an engine kind of rumble low, where I'm like, okay, I've gotten on planes where you had to go upstairs to get on the plane, in the past, in my life. And so I'm like, oh, wow, I'm next to some kind of plane. But I look up and I see this line kind of coming from behind me at an angle like this, and another line here, and this sloping surface. And I go, no plane. And this is in 1993, by the way. This experience was actually November of 93 from Corona del Mar, Southern California, coastal area. And I go, what is that? And then it dawns on me, because in 93, we'd started to hear about triangles. And I'm like, is that a triangle? Is what I'm thinking. And I'm like, what am I seeing? So I tried to draw here, me laying on the stretcher to the right there, me on the stretcher. These drawings I did a long time ago, and original sketches were done shortly after the experience, mostly from conscious memory that I did these. So that there's a military guard kneeling next to me and another guy next to him standing, both in camouflage. And the guy kneeling next to me has what I would call like a Dob kit or some kind of medical bag, you know, with him. And he has it open and it's kind of boxy looking anyways. And he pulls up my sleeve on my arm, gives me a shot. And he takes out a pen light a few minutes later. I'm laying there for quite a while. And I'm also able to look at the underside of this thing. In a moment, I have some more pictures here. I'm not sure the order of these pictures, so I don't know that matters. Oh yeah, there we go. So I'm able to look at the underside, and that's me on the stretcher and the two guys, and see landing gear. It looks like some kind of structure coming down with maybe 4 wheels on it, as far as I can see. And otherwise, it's all dark underneath. I'm actually far enough away that I can see the slope of this thing, and it clears, the bottom of it's clearing the ground. I didn't get an idea. I'm thinking it's got to be 5 or 6 feet, you know, between the bottom of it and the ground. And it's dark underneath, or maybe less, but it's dark underneath, but I can see a little, make out a little bit of some structure with landing gear. And then they, the guy leans in my face, takes out a little pen light and looks in my eyes. And I specifically remember him going, she's going, she's a goner. So I guess my eyes were, you know, dilated or something. Okay, because he's looking, he goes, she's going, she's a goner. Like I'm going to pass out, you know. And I'm thinking, no, I'm completely conscious. Okay, then they pick me up, they maneuver me around, and they go up a long ramp, again, like a 45-degree angle, you know, maybe a little bit shallower, but I go up this long ramp, and then they take me inside a doorway. Okay, now this is just to give everyone, those are the two pictures together. Perfect, I'm glad I have these in order. Okay, they take me through a doorway that's at a slant. And so this is, the top picture is what it would look like from the inside, because we go in this doorway and down these stairs, and then there's this slant to it. And at first I thought it was kind of a pocket doorway, but I've rethought about it. And then I remembered in one of the regressions I had said, no, it was like the door slid inside, and almost like you'd have like a, you know, if you go in like a minivan or something, right? The door would slide on the outside and then pull and then pop in. Well, this was like it slid on the inside and then went sideways and popped out, I think. Unless it did slide on the outside, but whether it was on the outside or inside, but it popped in and made a flush surface. So it was not a pocket door going in, you know, going in a pocket. It either popped out or popped in. Okay. And but when I went through this slanted doorway, I could see an inner shell and an outer shell, and between them wiring and tubing and insulation and stuff like that. So I could see kind of these layers of twisted stuff. And then they proceeded to, so they carried me up the ramp. There was a brief couple, you know, couple feet of it being like a flat surface, and then all of a sudden they stepped me down what was like 3 or 4 stairs. So there we go. Then they took me around. So this center drawing here, I tried to do like, there's the doorway in the stairs, and then there's a center column kind of thing that was roughly square or maybe semi-hexagonal, something like that. And then they took me around it, so they were maneuvering me, and they slid me in on like a padded shelf, I could say, that I remember. I've slept on sailboats before in my life. My friends of my parents had a boat. We would use it going to Catalina when I was quite young. And so I've been on a lot of sailboats, and as well as I've actually slept on one. If you think like a sailboat bunk, like you have two walls coming together at a point, and maybe the roof or the top of the boat comes in. I've also seen bunks on like speedboats. They're very much like that. And so I remember thinking, wow, this is like being put on a bunk in a sailboat, because you have the wall coming in at an angle and another wall coming in an angle. And there were two of these bunks, if you will. And I was put on the top one. Now, I show it with some kind of braces or straps in the drawing there, lower middle of the page. But I rethought about this recently, and I said, no, there were straps that came down, but that was after they put me on. So it was a stationary padded, bunk, like I said. And I think it was just, whether someone's injured, they can transport them on this, or maybe for long periods, maybe they sleep, who knows, but this is there. And then when they put me on, I was still on the stretcher. They put the whole stretcher on the shelf, and then they took straps and strapped me in. And so they two big, military looking straps strapped me in. And so here I am back on the, can you guys see the little arrow on the screen?
Yeah.
So they brought me in here, maneuvered me around, and put me here. And then here's the central column. And then in the front, I could see this bank of like windows that weren't a complete V, but they were kind of like you'd have a section and then a section and then a section and then a section that looked like plane windows. Now it was dark out, and I'm seeing these at this angle as I'm laying on the bunk, but I kind of drew it here as if this front leading edge was beveled, and there was a little flat plate, a flat plate, and a flat plate. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then a little triangle shaped window here. So there was kind of like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 with the windows is how I remembered. But I remember it seemed very much like you'd expect on a plane, other than the angles of them. Okay. And I also thought about it later. I think they were a little set back. I have no reason to think this, because I did not see the front of the craft from the outside. But I kind of wonder if maybe they were set back a little and there was a little bit of a lip over them, like they were indented from the outside. I don't know that either. They could have been flush. But this drawing here is what I think it probably was like from the outside, based upon what it looked like from the inside to me. And then as I'm here on the top bunk, and it wasn't quite this steep of an angle, it could be that the inside walls were set back quite away from the outside wall. I cannot say the outside size based upon the inside, so I kind of drew it like as if this was the outside and this was the inside. And there were these two shelves. Like I said, I'm on the top one, so that's my head, shoulders. But on the back of this column in the middle, which is actually bigger than I drew here. And then this was like the door and the stairs on the other side. And then I drew as if there was other equipment over here in this corner, or, other structure, whatever. But there was a guy who eventually, there were 3 people on this triangle other than me. And what they looked like was, if you remember the old Mercury 7 astronauts, like in the movie The Right Stuff, where they have the kind of close fitting, semi-baggy silver spacesuits, and then a smaller helmet, that these guys looked like that to me. Like they were wearing this kind of silver, closer fitting, not really tight fitting, but again, just like I remember thinking they looked just like Mercury astronauts from the movie The Right Stuff. And then they had helmets on, but not really big ones. And it almost makes me think of more like, if you've seen the pictures of, Doug and Dave with SpaceX and for their launch, and they just sent guys up again recently. And when you've seen that, although imagine like helmets kind of like that are smaller, but the Mercury 7 astronaut kind of silver suits, you know, compression suits, I guess they are, whatever. Okay. So, so a guy sits down, he pulls down a jump seat. There's a folded jump seat, just like, you know, your flight attendants sit on a plane. Okay, they pull it down and he sits on it, and he takes these two big straps on the wall and puts them over his shoulders. So he's strapped in. So I show him sitting here, and I just see other equipment on here, like wiring and tubing and a box and a dial, or, you know, who knows, on this column. There's other stuff going on. I don't remember it exactly. I just kind of drew a variety of possible other equipment. And then the front looks like this. Here's the windows. I had two guys drawn here. I think it's one. I'm not sure if there were two or one, but there was one guy sitting at a sideways panel like this, looking at some screens and other equipment, probably, you know, I don't know, radar, who knows, but he's looking at other stuff. And then this is like the front of a plane, other than the shape of it. And then the windows are like this on it. You know, here the windows are like this, and the corner ones are like that. And oh, sorry. Okay, don't need those. Okay, so there you go. And I remember that. Now I know this just sounds crazy, but you guys, I'm not the only abductee who was flown on one. I've had a lot of regressions to remember the entire thing. This is a very small portion of a huge MILAB abduction event. One where they were interrogating me about alien technology I had seen, and threatened me and roughed me up. And, you know, it was a very traumatic thing. And I had evidence as far as bruising on my body that a boyfriend of mine at the time took photos of the bruising. I've had other experiences with bruising that I also have photos for, but I had from that. And another researcher took some infrared pictures of the bruises on me, long story short. And but in this experience, I remember all of a sudden, once they closed the door and they strapped me in. Now, these guys had helmets and pressure suits on. I didn't. Okay, I'm strapped in on a blanket, and judging by what happened outside on the stretcher with the guy medically looking at me, is they expected that I'd pass out quickly from a drug I was given. Well, I'm still fairly conscious, or maybe I'm fighting the drug because I'm wanting to take all this in. But all of a sudden, the craft rumbles and turns on. Now, I had been to air shows in my life. I used to live in Irvine, California, and would go to El Toro Marine Base when they had it and go watch these military air shows. It was really fun. You know, they always had the Blue Angels come in really low, and, you know, it was really cool. But one year, or maybe more than one year, they showed Harrier jets. Really, I mean, we're really close to where they are at the air show. And so they're out on the, you know, on a, whatever, tarmac or whatever, and these Harrier jets, they would show them taking off. Well, a big Harrier jet takes off straight up, you know, and uses all this, you know, force of the engines pointing down or whatever. And all of a sudden it kind of lugs, and they change the engine position. And I feel like it kind of lugs and all of a sudden pushes forward. And it kind of first goes forward slow, kind of tilted, and then takes off. Well, as this thing lifted up, I thought this is what it would be like to be on a Harrier jet, because it lifts straight up with a lot of force and rumbling, and I smell the fuel really strong and like burnt electrical. And if anything, I felt like there was a little bit of like a smoke or something in the cabin, like it anyways, it was making it very hard to breathe. I was like, you know, and I remember I kept thinking, I wish the drug would make me pass out, because I'm finding it very hard to breathe right now. And it takes off and it pushes forward, and we're moving. And I want to say, it's just, if you've seen a Harrier jet do that, you know, that I'm like, okay, you know, and I've never flown on a military jet before. And so I was like, oh my God, you know, I'm like, you know, obviously not used to such a thing, not trained, started to get extremely nauseous. Between the smell, I couldn't breathe. My head started to pound. I thought, I'm going to pass out. But then the main thing I want to say here is all of a sudden it switched from thrusting forward, like you would feel a plane taken off every time, you know, I've taken off on a plane, to all of a sudden, and yeah, the camera's probably pressurized, but not that much or whatever, you know, all of a sudden there's a sudden feeling of no motion, maybe a split couple seconds of almost feeling weightless, like, you know, lifting off my stretcher. And it's strong, intense ozone, like burnt electrical or ozone smell, you know, rain in the desert, whatever, you know, really intense smell, or lightning, you know, really intense smell of that. And this feeling of weightless. And meanwhile, my head's pounding. I think my head's going to explode. I also feel like pressure around me. So a moment of feeling right before that, like intense pressure. And then, but then all of a sudden it kind of went away, and it was just no sound, no movement at all. And the inside got dark. It was very low lighting to begin with, very minimal lighting in there, mostly dark, but I could see enough that it was lit up at the front panel, and, you know, and maybe one light like right over where me and the guy on the column was. So I think he was there. He was like an extra guy, probably there to keep an eye on me. Obviously that's, you know, intended for that sitting place for them. And so he was, you know, he had his helmet on, but I kept thinking, God, I wish this drug. So eventually, whether it was the lack of air or the drug, eventually I passed out. But it had gotten dark, silent, no movement.
Question for you, Melinda.
And then anyway, so that's it. And I passed out. I came to standing in a hangar, and that's the rest of the experience. This thing I don't see, but I'm standing in a large hangar with the open aircraft hangar, and open to what I could tell from the smell was desert, nighttime in the desert. And I knew I wasn't near home, which is right on the coast, you know, Southern California coast smells like, you know, coast, you know, and suddenly I can tell, okay, this smells like desert. I'm in the desert somewhere. The hangar was open on the end, and I'm in this big empty hangar. Eventually, I noticed that these three guys that looked like these on the craft did, wearing their jumpsuits and their helmets, were standing in the distance on the hangar. And one of them motions to the other. A guy goes, takes his helmet off, holds it, and comes walking towards me. And anyways, I could go into more of the experience, but the rest is, you know, they take me from there and do all this other stuff. But anyway, so I was apparently transported on a big triangle. And how do I know it's a triangle? The way the way it looked from the outside, that sloping graphite surface, yeah, the line coming up like this and a line coming up like this, it was like a really shallow pyramid shape, you know, and it took off like that, thrust forward, and then obviously switched to some other form of propulsion in mid-flight.
Question for you, Melinda.
Yes.
Question. You've read the Wilson document?
Yes, of course.
Okay, at the end of the Wilson document, it says,
you know that answer.
I'm just
better question is, have I memorized the Wilson document? You know, yeah.
I'm just what's called poking the bear here.
Yeah.
When it gets at the very end and it says we don't have the technology, from your experience, what you're describing here is like really primitive sort of technology, like gas fumes and hair.
Well, no, I'm just saying, yeah. Well, the way it took off was like, yeah, I believe it used conventional technology taking off.
Exactly, that's my question. Okay. So it's not like they've got the Star Wars thing. It sounds pretty primitive.
In mid-flight, it totally went to feeling, like I said, intense pressure, where I thought my head was going to explode. I thought I was going to pass out and or throw up all at the same time. All of a sudden, a momentary feeling of weightlessness and then complete silence. And then I think kind of the lighting came back on because I could see the guy next to me, like looking at me. But at some point, you know, whether it was the lack of air or the fumes or the pressure, whatever it was, I did pass out.
So how many triangles have you been on? Just the one?
Just that one time.
Okay.
How many times have I been on?
Oh, you got.
Yeah. Only that one, as far as I know.
Okay. Nicole, you have a question?
I do not, except I will just comment that anytime Melinda speaks on her MILAB experiences, I start to feel sick to my stomach. And I'm sorry if I look a certain way, but I don't know what it triggers in me. It like raises my anxiety as well. So lady, I'm so sorry that you have to experience this, but I'm so glad that you can share it with us as well, because I think more people out there need to hear these kind of experiences.
Well, and people get mad when I smile and laugh because I choose to see the humor and stuff. I mean, those sightings, you know, and my clients' reactions is humorous. Mm-hmm. But in this case, you know, first off, I've shared this other times. I know people out there are going to say, well, they don't believe it, but you guys, it's my experience, you know, and when I come back with bruises on my body, I've been taken with other people, and so they have the recall too. Well, one thing I will say about this particular time, I'm not sure where I was loaded on this craft that they had to transport me. I think it was some local military base close to where I lived in Southern California. But they didn't take me very far. I don't know why they used something so elaborate other than just time saving, because they could transport me in, you know, probably 10 minutes when otherwise, you know, 15 minutes, something as opposed to something that made from where I lived on the coast in Corral Del Mar to where they took me would have been like a 2-hour drive, which is China Lake. Okay. China Lake Naval Base. And how I know that is later with the rest of the experience, seeing and out the way the buildings, there were 2 different tunnels and some buildings over some hills that I was also taken to. Those 2 tunnel hangars with openings, back ends going into an underground tunnel system, and then from one of the hangars on a helicopter to another building over a hill range. When I ended up sharing this with six different insiders over a 20-year period, all of them said, without my bringing it up, said, oh, you were at China Lake Annex, and ended up describing and telling me where I was. One guy who had worked there a bunch had asked me a bunch of questions and even said he like tried to mislead me, you know, in my description. I only saw what I saw. I wasn't all over the place, but I saw these 2 hangars, this one tunnel system, this building in the distance, and he said he even tried to mislead me, and I was clearly describing China Lake Annex. And like I said, now over, well, shoot, man, over almost 30 years now, I've had a total of 6 different people who claim they'd worked there. Now, again, the only reason I know that is because they told me that's where I was.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Turn off your share screen, and then I got one more question for you.
Sure. I got a question as well. Now, it really, like you just stated, it doesn't really make sense to me. Why would they take you on the craft to move you such a short distance? Do you think that maybe...
Well, 2-hour drive. If they're taking me in the middle of the night and this whole thing's got to last less than 3 hours, and they have all the other stuff intended that they're going to do with me there, it might have just been convenience, like this is a quick way to get me there.
Well, you know? I was wondering.
I mean, I don't know the answer. I just end up trying. Truth is, I don't know. You may ask me questions I don't really know, other than I've had all those same thoughts, and I've had to logically go, okay, why would they have done that? You know?
My thought that I was just having was, and a little bit of this is based off maybe my own learning how to fly dreams. I was wondering if maybe you thought your presence on this craft was maybe interacting with the craft, like they were using you to
not
maybe
this
power
time.
it or
No,
move it.
not this,
So,
not this time. This time, I think it was purely the quickest, simplest way to transport me to where they wanted me to be.
okay.
Okay, let me poke the bear one more time. I had an interview with Richard Doty, and he talked about giving pieces of the craft to a certain scientist. I don't want to quote it because I can't remember exactly what he told me. I had a discussion with JJ Buckner about you and her in a MILAB experience. Can you talk a little bit about them showing you pieces of the craft or getting you to operate certain things?
Oh, yeah, that was, well, yes. Okay. That was a very different experience, but one where her and I were taken together. And it was a DUMB, Deep Underground Military Base out here in the Sedona area. We have every reason to think that. And years later, well, 2 or 3 years after the event, I had a gentleman come forward, a guy who came out of my tour, who ended up asking me to talk to me privately a couple days after the tour, and we met and he took me out to lunch and we talked privately, and he ended up sharing a MILAB experience here in Sedona, and ended up being, we were part of a mass abduction that we have, again, we saw like 100 people. Well, he was one of the other people, and he came forward. He didn't know that I was there. He just shared an experience with me that was clearly the same experience, and he even knew the date that it happened, which was November 15th, 2011. And when he knew the date and he explained the same thing, here is a completely separate witness years later who came forward and told me he was part of it. He didn't know I was in such a thing. He just said, have you ever heard of anything like this? I'm wondering if you've ever heard of anyone else who could have been there. And I said, yeah, me, and because there were 5 of us, like you said, JJ, her husband, her daughter, myself, and another friend, 5 of us together, taken from JJ's house. And so we all recalled it, and 3 of us had later hypnotic regressions over it. And then as well. So going to what you were saying, that's just a little background information, but we all had hypnotic regressions and recalled this, or 3 of us did. And the other 2 people remembered it consciously. And so 5 of us taken together. But like I said, it was like 100 people in this event when we were taken to this underground base, 100 other abductees. I didn't count, but I'm just giving a rough number. And 2 or 3 years later, a gentleman comes forward to share a unique MILAB account with me, and it turns out he was one of those other 100 people in the event, and his memory of some of the specifics and things that we saw match exactly with what we recalled. But going back to, we were tested for PSI, paranormal functioning, and specifically telekinesis, or being able to move or manipulate matter with our mind. In this experience, we were tested for that. And we were asked to move a small floating object in one room. And depending on how you did with that test, if I guess if you did it the way they wanted or they were hoping, if you didn't do it or put up an argument or whatever, they took you out of this room down a hallway a certain direction. Well, if you did it, they took you another direction. So both Jocelyn and I guess, were able to do this to some degree because they took us in the success direction down this hallway. Anyways, but they take me in a room where they have a couple of like long linoleum top folding tables, like utility tables set up, and there's a guy or 2 in a lab coat, a guy or 2 in a lab coat, a military guard, short sleeve tans, and 2 guys in lab coats, and then 2 guys, one looking like military brass, pins and whatnot, clearly military brass, and the other one was a guy in a suit and or plain clothes, to the best of my recall, but not in military clothes. Both of them were older gentlemen, and they had this little object on a table, but behind it was this panel kind of tilted, kind of metallic looking with slots, and it had knobs on it. Well, in the beginning of this experience, we were originally removed from the house by ETs, and I have these in my research. I call them handoff accounts, where you can be taken by ETs and then see military, or be handed over to the military at some point. In this case, we were taken by ETs, but then this is with military guys, so we're handed off. And then at the end of this whole experience, we were brought back to JJ's house by ETs. But the ETs on their craft had shown us these geometric shapes floating in the air. And they said, focus on these. And I didn't know why. They just said, focus, these are important. And they kind of moved. And then I thought, even with the ET craft, am I moving these objects floating above me, or are they? But they said, focus on these, this will matter. Well, all of a sudden, when I'm looking at this panel on this utility table, I go, wait a second, it looks like ET tech. It's very, it's got slots and knobs and levers on it, and yet it looks very high tech. Jocelyn remembered that it had kind of a little backlighting, like there was parts that were white and maybe silver, and then a backlighting of a little bit of a blue light to some of the slots. Whoops, sorry, my phone's going off. I'm going to hang up on
Jim, send me Van again.
No. Wouldn't that be interesting? Okay, yeah, no. Okay, so here, yeah, he called when we were out doing a recent panel. For those who are watching this going, what's he talking about? He called when I was on a panel, and I was able to give him, up to the minute update from him, because live on the panel, But and he wasn't. I didn't know he was going to call then. He was returning my phone calls. So anyways, that's a long story on that. But so we're looking at this panel, and it has these knobs, and I go, wait a second, those geometric, each knob had a little geometric shape on it. And I went, those look like what the aliens showed us. And I go, they look like they should move, like each one's in a slot, like it could go up and down or sideways. And as soon as I focused on it, I'm not touching it, I focused on it, the knobs moved. And now there'd been this little separate thing on the table in front of the panel, was this separate little object that I remember being like a little brass pyramid. And they said, can you move this? So in the other room, by the way, there had been ETs also in the other room when we were moving the other object. So the ETs helped you in that case. And then when they brought us in here, there were no ETs present, and they said, can you move this, like move it on the table from here to here, can you move it along the table? And I did. And Jocelyn just reminded me recently, this long table, and I moved it a little, and they said, can you move it more? And I moved it more, and eventually I made it fall off the end of the table. She reminded me that. I had forgotten that, but she said, you made it fall off the end of the table. But I was more interested in this other panel behind this object. I go, this was a stupid little brass thing. Yeah, move it, And I think because the ETs had just helped us do that in the other room, that they helped, like they were standing around you doing like a mind meld thing. So when you were able to move the thing, even though you were doing it for these military guys, the ETs were helping you, whatever that, it's like they helped you in some way. And so as soon as they took you in here, no ETs present, said, can you still move this without them being there? I think because I just did it with them. Now, can I do that in daily life? No, although I do psychokinesis spoon bending classes and teach people how to do that. But does that mean I can move an object on a table? Well, no, have I ever moved anything ever? Yeah, once or twice, other than silverware. Yeah. Okay. Yes, I have. But okay. So, but here I'm moving this thing for them, and I made it fall off the table. But like I said, I was like distracted by the panel, because I said, what is that thing? That looks like some kind of ET, like an ET control panel, like a ship's control panel or something. I'm like, what the heck is that thing? So as soon as I said, I wonder if those knobs move, well, I was still in that frame of mind, that mode. So sure enough, the knobs start moving. And right then, the guy in plain clothes turns to the guy who's military brass and says, kind of like this, he kind of goes, we got another one. You know, we got another one. And I'm like, what? Got another what? You know, meaning me, like another person that can do it. I go, what? And then they said, thank you, Ms. Leslie. They always say Ms. Leslie in these experiences. Thank you, Ms. Leslie. And a guard, also I hear the door open in the back, and a guard comes in, and he goes, come with me. And I turn from my, you know, I'm facing the table. I turn to the back. No joke, you guys. In the back of the room were like, I always think like Baskin Robbins restaurant, not Baskin Robbins, Baskin Robbins ice cream places growing up, had these little chairs with the like little school tables, like a return on them. You know what I mean? Like a chair with a little desk, you know, like shaped like this on it. And folding white chairs, and sitting back in there in either the chairs and one of these little desks, like little school desks, what it reminds me of, is Jocelyn. So when they turned me around, she's in the back. I never knew, because they brought me in the door, took me to the table, had me do all this. I moved the little knobs on the thing with my mind, apparently, you know, and they congratulate me and say thank you very much. And one guy turns to the other and says, we got another one. But then I turn around and Jocelyn's in the back of the room, and she looks at me and goes, like, good for you. And so she literally goes like that, and she remembers that whole thing. I mean, you guys were remembering that part all consciously, you know. And so she goes, good for you. And I look like, you've been sitting back there the whole, I mean, we didn't say anything, but I'm like, you've been there the whole time, you know.
Couple new questions for you now. Have you done a book? I think you need to do a book. That's well,
it'd be a MILAB research book.
You could do the MILAB in my days with Semivan, and you could do all sorts of stuff. One of the things I forgot when you brought it up is maybe we could do a session one time, because someone said at the last panel, get Melinda to bend a spoon. So maybe we can do a little thing where we can do a little spoon bending.
Yeah, I mean,
lesson.
Okay, could I do it? Yes, but here's the deal.
Okay.
When you do it on camera, there's
no way to account for trickery.
There's professional debunkers. No, there's no way to account, like she just said, for hoaxing it. And so what I really do it, yeah, but anyone out there's going to rip me to shreds.
No, but I'm saying if we have a little course, you can have a little course. This is how, because you did spoon bending courses, right?
Yes, I do. I still do.
Or even just to talk about it, because that was one of the things someone said.
My class is 2 hours long. The whole first hour is talking, because I talk about, which is all deliberate as well. I talk all about how you would apply it to your life, why it matters. See, spoon bending's not about bending silverware. It has no, I always tell people, here, I'll grab one.
There we go.
Maybe we could do a closed group demonstration.
There's no purpose to doing this. You can't use it later other than maybe for hors d'oeuvres, okay? You know?
But it's very entertaining to people.
Okay, but here's the deal. It's entertaining. That has no value. See, it's not about bending. It's about you learning that you are, Grant, this is right up your alley. You're a huge field of consciousness. You are not contained in here. You're actually a large field of consciousness manifesting the physical form from the outside in, because you're drawing together from the universe, okay? You're manifesting this out of consciousness. This is actually conscious matter, okay? Your brain, physics is now proven. Your brain puts out a frequency all the time. That frequency constantly interfaces with all matter. There's no such thing really as a solid object. I usually will hit the table, or here's my phone, you know. It's, put this under electron microscope, and it's all like a gaseous thing. There's no actual hard surface, right? Okay, so when you go into that and you realize between the atoms, in other words, etc., that everything is being held together by consciousness. So the fact your brain, like I said, physics has now proven this, or science has, your brain puts out a frequency all the time. That frequency interfaces with all matter. Your consciousness interfaces with all matter. When you learn to control and use that, you can then change your life. You manifest your goals, your dreams, healthy body, you know, perfect health, abundance, whatever, you know, and you can learn to use that. So my showing people, you know, how to do this is not so you can learn to bend metal. This is so you know that your brain puts out a frequency all the time. And once you learn to use that, it's like you've gone through life with your hand tied behind your back. You know,
Yeah.
it's allowing you to have an extra tool, an extra hand at creating the life of your dreams.
Okay,
And so that's
yeah,
why I do it, to teach people
Yeah.
you have that frequency, it interfaces with all matter, and you can learn to use that. And it's already there, you're just ignoring it, so you can learn to use it. So that's why I teach it. It's not about learning. And to me, there's nothing about it that's about entertainment, because doing it on camera can be so hoaxed, so fake. And so that's why I steer clear of doing that. I'd rather people come to Sedona, sign up, take my 2-hour class. I got to have at least 2 people sign up together, because it's 2 hours of my time. The first hour is all about talking. I cover the history, where I learned it from Jack Houck. For those familiar with the history of the working group, they'll know that.
Explain who he is. Explain who he is.
Jack Houck was one of the original members of what we know now as the working group, the group behind what became To the Stars, ATIP, OSAP, and NIDS. Yeah. And then before NIDS, the working group. So it's kind of all the same people. But so he was the original meeting at BDM Corporation in 1985, when they came up with their plans of what they were going to do moving forward. He was one of those people. And now that group has morphed into what we currently know. I give a whole presentation, and maybe below this, you guys, if you want to link to that, that whole presentation about the 40-year history of the working group. But I knew Jack Houck quite well, and he was very famous for teaching psychokinesis, spoon bending classes.
So he was an engineer at McDonnell Douglas.
Yeah, he worked at McDonnell Douglas. He was in charge of advanced systems analysis for McDonnell Douglas for many years. Directly under him, the second, if he was director, the assistant director was Bob Wood, who we know quite well in the UFO research community, Bob Wood. And Dr. Bob Wood worked right under Jack. And when Jack retired, Bob Wood took his position at McDonnell Douglas until Bob retired. And Bob was also at that original meeting at BDM Corporation as well.
Beautiful, because that's what I would find interesting. Because if you just even a little thing on the idea of telekinesis, because most people don't really know. They know that people bent metal, and John Alexander was having these groups where they were bending metal and stuff. Mm-hmm. But I think it's kind of interesting that you were trained with. So where do you work in Sedona? Where would people come if they were going to come?
Center for the New Age here in Sedona, the Center for New Age, where I'm an independent contractor, but I have a great 10-year relationship with them. I also do readings here, psychic rings. I'm also a medium. I do dead people.
Wow, good.
Yeah. And
you do the sighting tour.
And then I do my UFO sighting tours, where I take people out every night. Like I said, I just had tour 1,275. So that's how many I've done. I always say I've done it a few times. Wow. I've done it a lot of times. But, and we've seen structural triangles 9 times. We've seen discs 3 times, et cetera, et cetera. And we always have sightings. It's not always structure, obviously. I tell people in the beginning of the tour, don't expect to see a structured craft, something, hard, structure. Yeah. Don't expect that. Yeah, we have 41 times on my tour. We've seen structure. 41 or 42. The last 2 were both about a month ago, and 2 nights in a row, we had boomerang shaped craft 2 nights in a row.
Wow.
With lights on them?
No, not lit up. Sometimes, no, they weren't lit up. One of them, I had oh gosh, how many people did I have? I probably had 8 people out that night, and we were all using the laser pointers. And at one point, about 3 or 4 of us were trying to laser these things that were going over us real fast, and because we had a couple objects up higher that we couldn't see the shape of, like in a formation. And then this thing came through, and we're trying to get it in the laser, and it's making kind of a fast arcing path. And all 3 or 4 of us have our laser beams cross at one place. And this object, one of these nights, came through the laser beams right where they were crossed. So we, right where they're crossed, was quite lit up. And you could see this thing make a nice like U-turn right through where the laser beams were crossed. Well, and these are really high power lasers that go up to 100 miles. So, we have them cross probably at a couple thousand feet away, maybe a little more, you know, and then this thing comes and makes this arcing path, and it was a nice kind of smooth boomerang shape. You know, it kind of reminded me of was all, you know, Kenneth Arnold, you know, original flying saucers, which weren't round, they were an arc shape, you know, but maybe it was something more angular. It was kind of hard to tell. I mean, it was definitely, I would say it had rounded edges. It was wider in the middle, narrower on the ends, and clearly was going fast and did a beautiful turn right through right where our lasers were crossed. Man, if I'd gotten that on camera, that would have been awesome. But anyways, and then and the night before, we also saw a boomerang. We had one at the distance that my client said it tilted. And at one point, two gentlemen were looking at it with their naked eye. Those of us with the goggles, of course, everything through the night vision goggles is green. And so we're seeing this green, you know, glowing thing. And it would kind of go black and then go green and then go black, like it was tilting, you know. And the guys said every time we said it was lit up bright and green, they said it was very amber. They said it was amber, but then it would tilt like we're getting the other side of it, and the other side would be black or silhouetted. So they said it would go silhouetted and then tilt again and be lit up very, very red. And then, you know, so it was lit up red on the underside, then tilted again black. And in the goggles, of course, that was going green, black, green, black. So, and I was glad that two of them got good look at it with their naked eyes and were able to describe that to us. So, and those were 2 nights in a row. So that was the last time, and that was about a month ago that we saw 2 structured craft.
Okay, 2 more questions. So who's the highest, whether you don't have to mention who it is, but who is the highest sort of level person that you've had on your tour that just kind of surprised you? Like you had Jim that offered to go on the tour, but I'm saying, like you mentioned airline pilots and stuff like that. Would that be the highest kind of?
Yeah, airline pilots, physicists. I had a guy from NASA. I mean, you know, it depends on what you mean by high, you know, but if you mean highly qualified witness, I had a guy who said he had retired 10 years, or not just, he'd retired 10, he was obviously, I'd put him in his 80s. I didn't ask him his age, early 80s. Yeah, clearly. And he said he was there with his whole family, kids, grandkids, you know, were there. And he had told me, he said, he had retired 10 years earlier from being like the head satellite guy with NASA. He said, and he gave me some years. It was like 30 some odd, 40 some odd, whatever years that he was the chief director of satellite, blah, blah, some part of their satellite department at NASA, you know, and I wish I could remember everything. But he said he had retired 10 years earlier. And I got a kick out of that night. We were seeing things at high altitude, but we saw a few things that were really fast. And of course, I talk all about satellites on the tour. I spend like the first half hour of the tour doing nothing but talking, and I cover satellites in depth so people know when they're seeing satellites. And here was the head satellite guy for NASA all these years telling me, you know, that everything I was saying about satellites was correct. Well, I've taken out like over 30 satellite experts, and so I've learned from all of them when I take them out. But this particular guy said not only was what I was saying was correct, but what really got a kick is we were having some super slow things that night, and he kept explaining as we were watching these really slow items that were, you know, objects high up, but barely moving, but clearly moving. I mean, and he kept explaining the physics, you know, and the science to my other clients to say, we can't put up anything in orbit and have it hold in orbit going that slow. And so, and you know, Grant, I've taken out over 8,500 people. He was the first. Now I've had a second guy. I had a second guy who was a satellite guy not long, about 2 months ago. So, and I laughed at him. But anyways, this guy, you know, this was a year or two ago when this older gentleman, and he said, I said, sir, I've taken out over 8,500 clients, and you're the only one who's been really impressed by the slow ones. And then I had a recent satellite guy get really impressed by the slow ones too. And I cracked up. He goes, what's so funny? I said, you're only the second person who's, you know, highly qualified witness who is extremely impressed by the slow ones. but yeah, so probably that guy. I should probably, try to do some research and find out, or sometimes I make notations in my organizer about when we've seen structure craft or things in formations, etc. Signs that really stick out, I'll make a notation. And sometimes I'll make a notations about the people there. I don't think I did. I should look back in my organizers and see if I can determine who this guy was and his name, and look up his background. But, as he was telling me about his background, his wife's there, his kids, his grandkids, they're all nodding, going, yeah, rolling their eyes back, So, I absolutely believed him.
That can be a chapter in your book, The Cool Guys That Came on My Tour. And then the Jim Van chapter. No. And anyway,
I will do a book. I started one years ago and shelved it when I came out to Sedona. I got so busy. And now I realize I kind of need to start it over. I mean, I still have stuff from it that I can use, but start over the whole thing, and even kind of the direction I'm going with it. But my first book will be about MILAB research. And I've worked with easily over 100 cases of people that have had that happen. And these are all evidence-based cases. It'll be about the evidence for MILABS, and I think a real book needs to be written about that. And that's the first thing that I'll do.
Yeah, because you're going to be a historic person 500 years from now, the stuff that you did and stuff. Now, I want to ask you one more question about, so you get all this stuff flying over, or you get the Nimitz, where they're flying around out in the international waters when they get attacked by the F-18s and stuff like that, or the stuff on the other coast with the balls inside the cubes and stuff. So what do you think is happening? Are they flying off to Phoenix to get beer, or what are all these objects doing that are flying around?
Your guess is as good as mine. No, truth is, I don't know. I thought today you would ask me about with the triangular craft sightings, is it ours or is it theirs? And obviously, I
is it ours like, or theirs?
There you go. That's what you call setup, folks. No, I'm just kidding. I would say the easy the easy and what I think is the accurate answer is that the majority of them are not ours. It's extraterrestrial technology. I can't see who's on board flying them when I've seen structure craft, and certainly the 9 triangles I've seen. But I've also, that one time, as we just shared, was flown on one as part of a MILAB event to be taken from a local military base, probably something much closer to my home then in Corona del Mar, out to, and I think it was just, rather than have a 2-hour drive there and back, it was easier for them to take me on a triangle, is my only guess, but that, stands to reason. But that one was clearly ours, and like you said, was fairly crude. Now, did it flip over into another form of propulsion while moving? I think so. I mean, based upon the way it felt and sounded and everything, it changed over into another form of propulsion, I would bet. But it sure took off in a conventional way.
Yeah.
But that was also in 93. So in 93, that might have been, who knows? Maybe that was state of the art for us in 93. Yeah. Which it could be very different now. Obviously, they got better at it. I think that's safe to say. So, but having had said that, and my clients ask me this all the time on the tour, how do you know it's not ours? And I said, well, I doubt very seriously that they're flying our top secret, most advanced top secret aircraft out in open airspace where everybody can see, because that would be announcing that they have it, and announcing that we have that technology, and certainly telling our enemies or adversaries that we have it. And so I don't think we're joyriding stuff out in open airspace. I think it's flown in extremely restricted airspace and is used, for both test flights and restricted airspace. But if they go outside of that airspace, they probably have to have very good reason to do so, and not joyriding over major cities. Here in Sedona, we share the same sky. We're only an hour and a half as the crow flies from Phoenix. We're about 20 minutes as the crow flies, 40-minute drive to Flagstaff. So Flagstaff, Phoenix, Prescott, and all, Sedona, Cottonwood, and Las Vegas, only, 4 hours away. So they're not joyriding our stuff out in open airspace for everybody to see. So
Yeah.
I think what we see on my tours is not ours. I think the triangle sightings I've seen are not ours because they're not joyriding our stuff. They're not going to come hover, 400 feet above Sedona.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah, you're right.
but I was flown on one. So do I know that we have them? Absolutely.
Yeah. The example I always use is the idea that you got to be able to recover it, because the most advanced technology we had when we went to get the Iranian hostages, we crashed a bunch of helicopters. That would be the special forces. And when we went to get bin Laden, that would be the top technology to get bin Laden. And they went in and crashed a helicopter there too. So you got to be able to recover it in controlled airspace where it's not over somebody's city or,
Well,
this
and
kind of
again,
stuff.
flying it over major cities, they'd be announcing to our enemies that we have that. And I don't think they're doing that. And so, yeah, if you go out to, Area 51, Nevada, Dugway Proving Ground, Utah, White Sands, New Mexico, et cetera, could you maybe see something that's ours being test flown? Sure. And I think lots of people have. There's a famous sign by Art Bell, radio legend Art Bell, of being in Pahrump, Nevada, and seeing a big black triangle come over him. That could have been ours because he was still within that, restricted airspace area. But I mean, who knows but I'm just saying could have been. And I'm not saying some sightings aren't, but what we're seeing over Sedona and hovering over the ground over Sedona, we're not joyriding our stuff,
Yeah, right.
For everybody to see. So I agree. The simplest answer is to say it's both, but I would say the majority of the sightings are not ours.
Beautiful. Nicole, you want to end it here?
I think we can end it here. I still got the sweats from Melinda's last onboard story.
I'm sorry I triggered you.
These stories really bother me.
Like, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
My palms are wet. And then I got really, really cold. So that's why I'm starting to yawn because I went from really hot to cold.
An abduction researcher online, an artist known for doing abduction work, Paul Mayo, had posted some question recently on Facebook saying, what triggers you about experiences? And with me, it's certain colored lights. We have an art gallery here in town that the whole thing glows blue. I call it abduction blue. It has this blue lighting, and it looks like the art gallery. It has all these big outdoor sculptures, and some of the sculptures are kind of ET like, it just, the whole thing looks like the art gallery and the sculptures are being abducted in this blue glow. Anyone who lives here will go, oh yeah, it's Exposure's art gallery, which is beautiful. But I mean, at night, it looks like it's being abducted. So, those kind of things trigger me. There's a house up on a hill here in town that has blue lights often that I kind of go, get that feeling. It's very brief because obviously I dealt with my experiences a lot, but I could see for someone who's newer to it. And anyways, the reason I brought up Paul Mayo and the question he posed is one of the things people kept saying in the comments and the response to answering his question is people are triggered by other people sharing their experiences. Like some abductees were literally saying on there, I can't listen to anyone else share their experiences. It triggers me too much. And so I understand. So I'm sorry that I've done that to you and to anyone else watching this. But hopefully too, if someone has had experiences similar to mine or MILAB experiences, they'll know they're not alone. I've worked with hundreds of people that have had it happen, or over 100 anyways. And so, it happens to a lot of people. It's not all abductees, but it's a bunch of the abductees. So, and whether it's just triggering you because of MILAB stuff or just triggering you because it's similarity to ET stuff, can happen both ways. It's not like I'm just, I'm flippant, I can just talk about this anytime. I trigger myself when I talk about it, but I've also worked with my experiences for years. I've been to a lot of support groups, a lot of hypnotherapy, a lot of therapists, a lot of discussion. I mean, I've earned being able to talk about it. And I risk ridicule every time I do, because people watching this will go, I don't believe it, and it's like, hey, then something happens. Like I have Jim Semivan come along, who's director of To the Stars, who not only believes that I've had these, but says he's been presented some evidence in support of the fact that I've had these, which he's not presented to me, but he says he's seen it. And someday when we get together, I hope to see whatever that piece of evidence is. But when someone like that and other people with the working group take serious interest in me, then I know, okay, and I've always said, when it comes to the MILAB experiences, the covert human involvement in abductions, the whole reason it's happening is because people have had very real alien experiences, that these covert guys want to know what we know. Like you said, Grant, what is the control panel? Are you able to operate it? Their interest in the technology is probably interest number one. Have we been affected and changed genetically, or are we hybrids? Is interest number two. You know, so these things are of great interest to these guys running these covert programs. And they're interested in some abductees, not all. Sometimes people have low-grade harassment surveillance stuff, black helicopter harassment, computer and, you know, phone monitoring stuff, and never have anything else. But then some people get abducted like me and interrogated, or have follow-up medical stuff happen. Some abductees then get recruited into covert programs. And so I've worked with some of those cases too. So, you know, it just depends on, they show a little interest in you, then they can drop you, or they might use you more. But my point being, it is all happening because these people are having very real extraterrestrial contact experiences that the covert guys are spending any money and time on them. Okay, so that's
Beautiful.
kind of the whole point.
Beautiful.
Thank
Looking
you.
forward to the book.
Don't hold your breath, you're likely to pass out. Okay.
Okay.
Oh, no.
Give me a couple years, please. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for doing this for us.
Thank
It's
you.
always a pleasure to
Oh,
talk to you.
my
And we did a little bit of different stuff
website
today.
for the center is ufosightingtours.com.
Yep.
Beautiful.
I
You're going
include
out
that
tonight?
on every video.
Yes, I have people tonight. I've got a group of 4, unless they've added anyone, but as of right now, 4 people for tonight. Yeah, in fact, I have just enough time that I'm going to go eat dinner. You guys,
Beautiful.
you told me this wasn't going to be a long interview today.
Well, we get you going, and then
Yeah,
it's,
you sure do.
Plus a long.
Grant knows me too well.
Yeah,
That's for
Melinda,
sure.
thank you very much. We
Thank you.
really
Thank you,
Melinda.
guys. Thank you.